if you are going to own your own business, you cannot be afraid of failure. I know that sounds so cliche. You will fail, you will mess up, you will spend too much, you will have a website drop where somebody buys nothing, and you have to learn to just turn that into a learning opportunity. Okay, what can we learn from this? What did I like? Turn it into an experiment. Make it a little more objective, and understand like your success as a business is not a reflection on your personal worth and value. And that's really, really, really hard, especially if you're running a business on Instagram, where social media is designed to feed into our ego and our self-image. You have to learn to separate yourself a little bit.
Welcome to my video cast titled Zachwyty, which translates from Polish to delights. I'm Anna from Gdańsk, Poland, where I run my vintage rentals business. Here, I chat with inspiring individuals who have turned their passion for vintage and antiques into unique businesses. I'm so happy to be able to talk to you today, Whitney. It was already some time ago that I discovered your Instagram profile, Thrifty Whitney, and it instantly drew me in. It is filled with tips for other online vintage sellers, with your behind-the-scenes glimpses of sourcing adventures in the US. Am I right?
Yeah.
And above all, your delightful sense of humor. The more I followed you, the more eager I was to talk to you. And I recorded a very spontaneous voice message.
I'm so glad you reached out, and especially voice. I love voice messaging, partially because like I have too many words and I don't have time to like type them all out. So
plus it makes this connection so much easier instantly.
I'm really excited to chat about vintage, and I'm so curious to hear about differences between the US and Poland and think, how it I love talking about business and antiques together. So yeah, this is going to be a great time.
What kind of got me on to start this project was that I was always intrigued in people's journey into the vintage world. So I would love to start with that question. What inspired you to start your own shop?
So just for a little bit of background, so I'm married and we have 3 kids that are 10, 6, and 2. And we live in Kansas, which in the Kansas City area. So we're basically right in the middle of the US and in what we call like the Midwest, which has its own kind of distinct culture and flavor. And so back in 2021, and even more background, my training is actually as a registered nurse. And I was working in a clinic, but then I was furloughed. I was only working part-time, and then I was furloughed. And then during the furlough time, realized how burnt out I was and that I was just like done. And so when they called me back, I quit. And then we homeschooled our kids for a few years, just because of the challenges with the education system here during COVID. And then I had run a small online sort of business before on Instagram. It was around books and reading, but I got really burnt out just creating all digital content. Like when you have to sit there and it's either you're reading books and then you're making videos or blog posts about it. And I had an online course and memberships and all these things, but I think that combined with homeschooling my kids, and then I got pregnant. On my brain, I was just maxed out. I was like, I can't do this anymore. But then I had some friends locally that mentioned that they were starting to sell vintage or things they find at the thrift store on Instagram. And I'm like, I didn't even know this was a thing. And my background, I was the oldest of 5 kids growing up in a really small kind of rural farming town, and thrifting. It's so funny now that it's so popular with like the young kids, because that was just where we had to shop. We had to buy everything thrifting. My parents and my grandparents' house was filled with antiques. We just grew up. It was just part of the background of my life. So I, didn't
same
realize.
Here.
Yeah. You're just like, this is nothing special. Never occurred to me that I could make money doing it. And so my friends had mentioned this idea, and I was like, oh, that sounds kind of fun. Like, And so I just spontaneously was like, Thrifty Whitney. I love alliteration. It rhymes, whatever. It's fun.
Yeah, it is excellent.
And just started going to estate sales and thrift stores. And then I was like, I'll just put some stuff up on Instagram. And it worked. I think one reason that I had an early success in selling things was because I had an audience that followed me over from my old Instagram account. Because
so you just changed the name of it and just like
I I created a new account because I was still running my Bookstagram account at the time, and then I just was like, hey, you can follow me over here too if you like vintage stuff.
All right.
And
Yeah.
then very quickly realized I've always been a lover of stories. This is where the books and the antiques, there's like a crossover effect where it is the story and the history that I love it. I think some people enter antiques and vintage from like the home decor, like interior design aspect, and
Or
then realize
sustainability, some maybe,
and
like,
sustainability. Like
yeah.
I have this idea, like, and some people like it's a mix of all. For me, it was very much the history and the story, and then realizing very quickly that I love to have my own business. I come from a family of small business owners and entrepreneurs, and I didn't realize how much it was in my blood. But I think that for someone to be successful in their vintage shop, you really do have to love both the business aspect and you have to love the buying and the selling.
Yeah, exactly.
Lots of people love the buying, and the selling can be a struggle. So I started doing that, and then basically started on Instagram and was selling a lot on Instagram, and then started selling on Etsy, opened an Etsy shop because I was like, I can't keep manually processing all of these orders on Instagram. Like, I need Etsy to kind of do some of the back end work for me. Etsy is great. I still have an Etsy shop where I cross post things.
Yeah, it's
Then
very
I got,
interesting actually that you
yeah,
talk about Etsy, because here, obviously some people use it, but it's definitely not as popular, or maybe it is popular for those niche products. I think I've even read it also on one of your Instagram posts that it works best for certain items, but not for all. And it's also like just one way to market your
yeah,
shop. Yeah,
yeah.
but sorry to interrupt.
No, it's fine. I mean, it is, I always tell people, especially people who struggle with Instagram and struggle to build enough followers, like they have really, really good stuff, but they're not selling enough. I'm like, open an Etsy shop because I guarantee you will start making business. There's this bias we have towards social media and Instagram. Like, we want to have a lot of followers and we want to have, like, there's just this general social bias towards having a really big Instagram account. I'm like, if you're not making money, then it doesn't matter how many followers you have. Anyway, so then Etsy, I ran some numbers at one point, and this was, I'm not sure. I think I opened my website in the fall of 2022 and realized 25% of I was driving 25% of my Etsy traffic from my Instagram. So when I ran the numbers, I'm like, if I were to redirect that to my own website, I'm going to break even. If the website costs $300 a year or something, I was like, that's breaking even. And as my Instagram account grows, then I will save even more money, by getting people onto my own website from Instagram and then just cross posting. And that's been very successful for me. Even sometimes where it's like, I don't have anything to post to Etsy after a website drop, I still get orders every week from that. So yeah, that has been kind of my journey into this whole business, kind of a big bird's eye view.
That's really exciting to hear. Were you also like into vintage home decor yourself before? I mean, like, I don't mean like when you were growing up, but before that, when you were raising your
Yeah.
kids and such.
Yeah, it's funny to look back because generally, I mean, we went through when we first got married, we went through the IKEA phase, and we went through this or that, and then, but I was always trying to buy things secondhand because, I mean, I'm sure it's the true everywhere, but new furniture here is just so expensive, and the quality of new stuff is so bad a lot of times, and so it again, I don't think it was even, I'm not a big home decor person, but it was just going to the thrift store and finding things that I loved. And 9 times out of 10, it was vintage. It was older stuff. So
what I also like notice, the more I talk to people, the more I see that everyone has their own sense of aesthetics when it comes to curating objects. So I wonder what kind of objects you like to shop for your own shop. How do you know which item is going to sell well?
So I think this is a question a lot of new sellers ask me. Like, they want the golden ticket, right? Because you
All
get
right,
so
yeah.
overwhelmed and scared, and you're trying. And I'm like, honestly, it's just trial and experiment. You just have to see, because I feel like everyone's style and personality is different enough that it attracts a unique mix of customers. And so it's like you've got to try to figure out what fits with you. I very firmly believe a few things. If I am not excited about an item, then I'm not going to be able to like share that excitement with my customers. And it doesn't have to be, there's some things where I'm like, this is so cool. I would never put this in my house, but it's really cool. And I can visualize it in someone else's house. And there have been some things where I work with some pickers. Do you know this term? Okay, so there are, it's like dealers who sell to dealers. They go out and they pick for me. So they'll find stuff and then they come and they sell it to me. So they might be the ones going to auctions, estate sales, buying privately. Since my time is so limited with small children, I might pay a little bit more, but I get really good stuff because they basically curate a selection for me. So I have pickers here in the U.S. and then also like locally, and then I have a couple in England that just once they get your style, then it's just easy because you can look at stuff and be like, yes. And a few times they'll show me stuff and I'm like, no. He's like, this is going to sell for so much. I'm like, I don't care. I don't like it. I just can't get over it. Sorry. If I don't love it, I can't, my customers aren't going to love it. And the other thing too is, especially when it comes to home decor, is there are some things that are really cool, but I have to be able to help people and visualize it in their home. So there's some times where I'll see something and I'm like, that's cool. I have no idea what to do with it. There was like these antique copper not just fire extinguishers. They were like oxygen tanks for firefighters. They're copper. They're huge. Some people do love them, put them in their home, but I had a friend who messaged me and she's like, should I buy these to resell? And it's totally not her style. And I was like, what would you do with them in your house? She's like, I have no idea. I was like, then don't buy them. Because we have to be able to answer that question for our customers of like, what am I going to do with this? So it has to be and if it is simply like, this is going to sit on my shelf and remind me of a time in history, like there's people collect things and they just put them on the shelf and they know exactly where it's going to go and it's going to fit in with their style and stuff. That's great. So those are two questions that I kind of run through with my head with anything. Like I experimented a lot with different styles and buying different things. And I really do love, I kind of think of me as really trying to buy things that are pre 1950, especially when it comes to quilts.
Yeah, I
And that's
love
something,
your quilts.
yeah.
Oh,
And that's something I'm kind of known for. And that was something I stumbled onto very early on because Kansas, our specific area of the country, is very, very quilt rich. We have, we're very much the state of pioneers and farming communities and women who this was the way that they kept their families warm and kept their hands busy. Back in the 1930s, there was a nationwide revival of interest in colonial crafts and quilt making. And a lot of the most well-known historians were from the Kansas area. Our local newspaper was one of the first ones to start printing quilt patterns in the newspaper for all of, I think, the Depression era women, who wanted the quilts. So you've got the Kansas City Star newspaper quilt patterns. Our local museum has one of the biggest quilt collections in the nation. So there's a lot of rich history here where I am. So any estate sale or auction, 90% of them are going to have a quilt. They may be like not very nice quilts, but there's quilts everywhere. And so, and again, the thing that attracted me to that was the individual, like every quilt is unique, and the artwork and the handiwork that goes into it and the story of the person who made it. It's the exact same reasons why I also really love original artwork, especially when I can trace back and find out a little information about the artist. So those are things I really do love. Primitive decor, so things that are handmade.
it's trending now, isn't it, in the US?
It's really funny because I think for every niche in the vintage market, there are always collectors. There are always collectors for quilts,
That's
for
also true.
iron.
Yeah.
But then occasionally, so you have them in little pockets, but then occasionally these the decor trends will pop up and it'll kind of explode a bubble for a little bit. And the market gets really hot and then it kind of shrinks down as interest, and then another bubble pops up. So it just, everyone kind of takes turns having their time in this spotlight.
So just to be sure, primitives are, for example, I don't know, like pizza boards, milking stools.
Yeah, like old, like I have a pile of breadboards, which this is not really primitive. These are from England, but like handmade, like folk art. So one-off handmade like art objects, hooked rugs, quilts, very much, especially if they're antique, are considered primitives. Old furniture, so things like that, especially handmade items. And ironstone, there's a huge niche collector market for ironstone as well, which I do a lot of too. So I think the experience of knowing what will sell, again, there are some things that I know will sell the minute I show them in my Instagram stories, or they'll sell in my live, they'll sell in my website job. And there's other things where I'm like, I know that will sell on Etsy. Like I have listed several of these pieces now. The big copper jam pots, they have brass, like they're big, like shallow pots, and they're French in style. I mean, every time I list that on Etsy, I know it will sell in less than a month. So copper is another really big one for me, and I love finding copper that always sells. So that's so helpful when you're out pricing, because it's like, like I know I can buy that at $40 and it'll sell for 200, and you don't have to think
Forty
about it.
dollars sounds even a lot for copper. I mean, what I want to say is you'd love shopping vintage in Sweden then, because there is so much
Oh,
copper there, and it's so cheap. It's so unbelievably cheap still. Although it got a bit more expensive because all the metals as such,
yeah.
yeah, got expensive in the world. But
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I find we have there's tons of the Korean copper and Taiwan copper and stuff, which is fine, but the quality's kind of poor. So I am trying to stick with like English and French and American copper, or just European copper when I can find it, which is a bit harder, but it's gonna like be better quality for people's money.
having in mind that there will be, I imagine a lot of Polish followers that will listen to us. Could you maybe explain how you source your items? Because you said you mentioned pickers, so that's definitely something I've never heard of. You mentioned estate sales, which definitely are not a thing here. I mean, there are estate sales, but not so like available to the public.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else can you explain
Yeah.
what an
Yeah.
estate sale is? And
Yeah. Oh, this is fun. So an estate sale is usually because of the 4 Ds. So death, debt, divorce, or downsizing. So usually what happens, basically, let's say grandma, I don't even know, are nursing homes a thing in Poland, or retirement homes okay. So, grandpa dies and grandma needs to move into a retirement home, and they have a house full of antiques. Some of the houses don't have that great of stuff. But they will contract with a company and an estate sale company, and the estate sale company comes in, and the good companies will go through the entire house. So imagine grandma has 5 million boxes of stuff in the attic and garage. They pull everything out, they price everything, sometimes clean it up, stage it, make it look presentable so that people can shop it. And then they advertise the sale. There's a special app called estatesales.net where everyone lists their estate sales. You can also find them on Facebook Marketplace. And then they'll usually run it for, 1 to 4 days, depending on how much stuff there is. The first day might be full price. Maybe the second day is 25% off, and it discounts as the sale goes on. And depending on how good the stuff is, I mean, I've gotten to an estate sale at like 5, 6 in the morning and waited for 3 or 4 hours for the doors to open, because people will wait in line. I mean, when it's really good stuff, you have to be the first one in the door to get it. So it's a really, it's a just a hilarious atmosphere because it's like, so one thing, a lot of estate sale companies, they don't post the address for the house because last
Mm-hmm.
year or a year or two ago, there was a rash of people breaking into the houses. So imagine they're posting pictures of like sterling silver that's going to be for sale. And they had a couple houses that were broken into. So at 5 a.m. or 6 a.m., they post the address and everyone drives over there. And then every city is different how they handle the line situation because you're not actually standing in line for 3 hours. So what we do in Kansas City, this is just a Kansas City thing. You get a line marker, so anything. It could be like a tape measure. I've used my kid's shoe one time. I mean, a bag and whatever, a rock. So then you put it down on the sidewalk outside the house, and then you can go back to your car. But you're not supposed to leave the area. You're supposed to stay in your car, you have to stay there, which is really a
At least you
problem.
can wait in the car if it's raining, so that's good news.
Yes, or in Kansas we get really extreme weather, so it might be 90 degrees, it might be like
All
super
right.
hot or freezing. It is always a problem because again, people who are checking teeth, and you're like, well, I have to use a restroom now, so I've like left my car parked and walked to a like restaurant, like a McDonald's, to use the restroom. So then the door opens, and you always have like your big IKEA bag where you can put your stuff in as you're shopping. And Kansas City in general, I hear some horror stories of people who are really rude and very just not
You
nice.
mean the
But
buyers or
like the buyers who are there who are running around trying to get stuff. But generally, Kansas City, again, Midwest, we're kind of known for being like laid back, nice, really friendly. And generally it's fine, and you get in there, and yeah, so then you just go through the house. Like generally every room will be staged with stuff, and you pick it up. There's a hold table where you can like fill up your bag and set it on the hold
yeah.
table, and people are not supposed to
What if
like
it is a piece of furniture? Do you like stick notes
there's
or?
yeah, usually they have tags, so you grab
Mm-hmm.
the tag and you go to one of the employees and they'll put a sold sticker on there.
Right. Yeah.
So I've even had this was I mean, I've had things not taken from me, but someone snatching something that I want, and that's just how it is. Like you can't get too emotional or upset about it. I waited in line one time for 2 hours outside a house with my toddler to get these two quilts. I was number two in line. The lady and I kind of chatted, and I followed her into the house, and she picked up the two quilts I wanted. And I told her, I was like, can I just look at them? They were so good. I mean, and that's just how it is. She got there before me.
You
But
couldn't
when
know.
she left, I did give her my cell phone. I gave her my business card. I'm like, if you're a quilt collector, let me know when you're ready to sell some of your quilts. And now I've gone to her house several times, and I've bought a lot of quilts from her. So
Oh wow.
it worked out. It worked out. But then there was this other story where I went to this estate sale, and it was the second day, and they had lots of pine. I really, really love antique pine furniture. And there was a hutch, you've seen it probably in my reels. It's in my living room, and it's so gorgeous. And I went, and the hutch was still there, and it was half off. But the sticker was they had a tag, but the tag was very confusing as to whether it was sold or not. And I looked at it, and I went and talked to the employees, and I went back and I looked, and then finally they were like, no, it's not sold. And then I went back, and a guy was doing the same thing that I had been doing. He was looking at it, but he was not physically touching the hutch. He was looking at the tag, and he was looking around, and I reached up and I snatched the tag out from him, off the
Yeah.
hutch, and he looked, and he gave me just the nastiest. I was like, sorry, Dad. And he
So
was
it is
complaining.
competitive.
I mean, he was complaining to the employees about it, and I was just like, I mean, dude, I know what it feels like. Sorry, but not sorry, because I wanted that hutch. Yeah. So that's kind of so estate sales. There's also auctions. So there are a lot of live in-person auctions, which are so fun, but I do not get to go to very often because I just can't go all day. You can get really good deals there. It is so fun, and I'm like a big people person. Like watching people and everything
Yeah,
is
me
so fun
too.
for
Me
me.
too.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
I go to auctions in Sweden every summer
Oh,
because they have those loppies. It is like big flea markets. At the markets, they also run auctions, and it's just like a happening for a village, for example. And oh, I love it.
Oh my, that's like a dream. That's a dream of mine. Yeah. So what I do is I can put in an absentee bid, so if I can't be there, I just call the auction house and put a bid in, and then we
Uh-huh.
do it. Yeah. So not most of the auction houses will take absentee bids. And then there's also a lot of online auctions, especially after
I was gonna
COVID.
ask exactly.
Yeah. So I do those a lot. And then, of course, we have thrift stores, flea markets, we have outdoor markets during the summer. And then Facebook Marketplace, I use some. I mean, I've gotten some really good connections through there. It's hit or miss. And then as my business has grown, the word of mouth referrals have grown also. So this one family, that I actually met through Facebook Marketplace, I bought some stuff from them, and then, oh, well, here's my friend's number, and here's my sister's number, and now my mom wants to sell her quilts. So I think that when you are, really conducting yourself really professionally and
Yeah,
connecting with people,
yeah,
then that's getting the word of mouth referrals is huge. So
exactly. I can imagine. I mean, in any business, human relationships, work best. But I think here, this world can be more old-fashioned than we think it is, actually.
I know that's what I always tell people. I was like, get business cards printed out. You'll be so surprised. And it also just makes you it really does give kind of this professional, anyone can have business. I know it's funny because anyone can have a business card printed out, but it does really kind of lend a
No, I
professional.
totally agree. Plus, with elderly people who you also like
Yes.
probably deal with, this is kind of natural for them to get a business card. Definitely more natural than an Instagram account.
Yes, absolutely.
So you have estate sales, thrift shops, just the kind of markets. But oh, I know one thing that you didn't mention, and we definitely don't have that many, if we have any at all. I think there is one in Warsaw. Antique malls. What are
Oh,
they? Can you explain? I mean, I know I've obviously watched plenty of YouTube channels, people running a booth in such a mall, but can you give us a
yeah.
picture of what it is and how it works?
So yes, I have noticed that this is doesn't seem to be a really big thing in Europe. Okay, I watch Salvage Hunters with Drew Pritchard all the time. So that's if you don't, okay, he's one of the top UK like architectural salvage dealers. I talk about him all the time. I'm just putting it out in the universe that someday I will meet him. Anyway, so it's all on YouTube. So it's fascinating to watch him go because he goes to Sweden and France and some other
All
places.
right, I need
Anyway,
to check him out then.
yes,
Yeah.
you do. So with the antique mall, so they'll have basically like a big warehouse or a big store, and then antique dealers will rent out booths, so small spaces, or it could be bigger spaces, and then they set it up and display it. Think of like what it would look like at an antique show, but then it's just open, every day from.
Is it open like all year round or
Uh-huh.
seasonally?
No.
All year
Now,
round.
yeah, most of the antique malls, yeah, they're open every day and, normal business hours. And so I have a booth in an antique mall. There's also been this new thing kind of started with, it's called First Fridays. So there's some antique malls and they're only open the first weekend of every month. So it's almost like an antique show every month. But the one I'm in is open all the time.
Okay. But then do you have to be present in your booth or have
No, so they have employees that run the store. So I go in about once a week and I'll bring in new stock, I'll rearrange things, clean things. Yeah, and so that's been really fun. I mean, it's a lot of work to be there physically, but I felt it was important for me to do to connect with local customers and also just get the experience of setting up a physical booth. So, yeah, and it's been good. I opened my booth in November and like it's been fun. There is a balance between and this is something a lot of people say, like the price points here in the Midwest, generally stuff is cheaper here than on the East or West Coast. So there are some, I'm going to put my high end stuff on my website, but for small stuff and furniture, it can go in the booth and then it's theirs.
It's my dream. It's on my bucket list to go to an antique mall in the US.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
man.
Oh, it would
It
be
can be pretty
fun.
overwhelming. Yeah, it can be overwhelming even for me, some of the big ones.
Yeah, I can imagine. So I often hear that the resale market in the US is exploding. I think it is quite true for this part of the world as well. And is it really true that it's getting harder and harder to curate items for any shop owners, or that maybe the, I don't know, thrift shops have gone crazy on the pricing?
Yeah. So this has been so I'm speaking as this from someone who started selling post COVID. So I can only say what I've heard secondhand from sellers who were doing this before COVID. A lot of the older, not older in age, but the sellers who've been doing this longer have said that with the explosion of Instagram and social media giving people an easy platform to sell, that there was a huge influx of sellers coming in to sell, and they were saying that it was harder. I think with thrift stores, I mean, there's a lot of people who have complained about thrift stores being really expensive, especially because in the US, thrift stores started as a way to serve economically disadvantaged population. So their prices were supposed to be really cheap, and it supported charity. And what
Exactly.
I think has happened with the thrift stores is that with the middle class, both because of just trends and because middle class people also were not able to afford and some people it's just like, for me, I mean, for example, there's this one thrift store, there's a specific brand of jeans that I love, and they're usually over $100. And I know if I go to this thrift store, I can usually find a pair in my size. I don't know who this
Mm,
wonderful person is that wears these jeans for a little bit and then donates them. But I love her. Or I love her, whoever she is. But it's like, why would I pay over $100 for a pair of jeans if I can get them for like $15 at the thrift
exactly.
store?
Yeah.
Like, that's just, why would I do that? So I think the target market for thrift stores has changed from their whole strategy is now let's sell to the middle class. They can afford to pay more, they're willing to pay more. And then we're still giving our proceeds to charity. And that's how we're helping the less, economically challenged. This is my theory. And I have a lot of people like, we should complain, we should protest. I'm like, you can do whatever, I mean, you can say whatever you want, but you vote with your dollars. You vote with your dollars. The thrift stores know if they can sell something for a lot of money, they're going to do it because
Of
it's the bottom
course.
line.
So in Sweden, I noticed even they have like those advisors coming in. I mean, I don't know if it's like every thrift store that does it, but I just saw, volunteers who have certain expertise coming into a shop and just, pricing those more valuable items. And I think it's fair in a way that, why would they, sell something so cheap while it is
Yeah.
so valuable? So
And I am friends with there's a really big thrift store in town, probably one of the biggest ones, and they have antique appraisers on staff. At other thrift stores, I've not asked about lowering prices or anything, but I have heard people will sometimes offer. I guess I have. Like, there was a whole china set. They had priced it each individually, and I'm like, how much can I get the whole set for? Things like that. So yeah, generally they just want the stock to move.
so is haggling, is negotiating
Mm.
prices okay in the US?
Yeah, so this is an interesting question. So in the antique world in general, yes, you negotiate, you haggle, you offer. Like, this is very, very normal, especially when you're selling dealer to dealer. You know, I and my goal is always like for everyone to be happy. Actually, there was this, again, advice from Drew Pritchard. He's like, there should be a little bit of a pinch on both sides. The seller should feel like they're selling it for a little bit less than they would like. The buyer should feel like they're paying a little bit more than they would like. And once you find that spot, and then that's actually right where you need to be
Yeah.
with dealing. And so, like at estate sales, if you go into an estate sale and it's the first day, like they're not going to negotiate with you. But if you go in the afternoon of the last day, they just want it gone, right? Facebook Marketplace, you can negotiate. Antique stores, you can pretty much on any item that's like over $100, most dealers will give 10% off, or they'll talk, like if you go in and you want to make an offer, they'll call the dealer, and I've had that happen at my store. It's just very normal. Someone asked me, like, do you negotiate prices on your website? And I said, no, I don't negotiate prices on my website, but I have coupons like all the time and I do sales and stuff. So that's my way of having a more accessible price point at times for people. So
Oh, I was just curious what's the culture? Thank you.
is it normal? Is that kind of how it is in Poland? Or
Yeah, definitely. Haggling is a big thing, I would say.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I have a lot of friends because one thing I do I didn't even mention this. Well, I did sort of with the private buys, like going in and just offering people money or negotiating that. And I have a lot of friends who are like, that sounds so intimidating. And it really is a skill where you go in and you're able to be like, this is what I'm thinking. Okay, you're thinking a lot higher. Where can we meet in the middle? But also, I lived in Cambodia for 3 years and I've spent a lot of time overseas. And bargaining, that's just, if you don't bargain, if you just take
It's
the first
strange
price they
then.
give you, they're like, you are an idiot. I mean,
Yeah,
it's just expected. That's just a skill you have to practice and get comfortable
exactly.
with, and know how to do it in a way that's like respectful and kind and friendly and laid back, and also realize like this is just stuff. If I get it at the price I want it, awesome. If you go higher than what I can pay, no hard feelings. I totally get it. A lot of times if the seller's way up here and I'm down here, I'm like, okay, this is what you do. List it yourself at this amount. And if you get down to this amount and no one's bought it, just give me a call and you know where I'm at. And half the time they do give me a call because they just don't want to mess with selling to the public.
I would like to talk about the humor on Instagram because I think it's actually really interesting. I talked to one couple who sell vintage. They are based in the south of Poland, and they use humor on their Instagram. They are funny and they do that, but they shared with me that they had this fear that maybe it takes away not so much maybe the charm but the prestige from vintage and antiques, and they were hesitant whether they were doing the right job being funny on stories and such. And I told them this is exactly why I follow you guys. I think it is not very natural for the sellers here to
Oh,
be
okay.
funny on Instagram, especially for the antiques sellers. So it's really interesting, and I just wonder how it influences your engagement on Instagram, and whether what was it part of your strategy or is it just a reflection of who you are?
I know. Yeah, I never thought of it as being part of strategy. And that's
Uh-huh.
interesting. I wonder if there's cultural differences in there. Like I said, in the Midwest, we're pretty laid back and casual. Funny humor is a big part of my family culture, like the family I grew up in with my parents and siblings. And so, and it really has become part of, I think, my Instagram personality. It's just a reflection. I have some friends who they're funny people individually, but on Instagram, their strengths are more in creating maybe like a really fun, relaxing, inviting space with photos and, certain lifestyle things. And that's just where they feel strong. For me, I try sometimes I even experiment a little bit. Like I do reels. I'm like, I actually think this is going to do really bad. So let's post it and see if we can
Uh-huh.
confirm. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, that did not perform well. And now
Mm-hmm.
I know, that I shouldn't do those kinds of reels. I do some of that experimenting. So I mean, it's really hard. I think there's power in not taking oneself too seriously, especially when we make mistakes or when we are learning something new. I also think on Instagram, humor is a really big, probably defense mechanism for me, because the bigger your account grows, there's like this relationship between the more followers you get, the less, what's the word I'm trying to think of? People feel like they can say whatever they want to you. I have very, very thick skin, and so on the Instagram, and so there, I just find, like there was, do you know who Napoleon Dynamite is? This is like a cultural icon. Okay, I can't even describe. This is something I'm like, this is so American. It's this movie that was made. And anyway, there's the main character is very awkward and funny. For my generation, like this was the movie in high school and college that we would watch over and over and over and over again. And there's so many cultural references to it. So it's probably 20 years old. He has like glasses and really curly fro hair. And I posted a reel completely unrelated to, it was just me talking, and someone commented, "I'm sorry, but you totally look like Napoleon Dynamite right now." And then I screenshotted that and did a poll and was like, "This is hilarious." And I had so many people that were like, "That is so rude. How could they
All
say that
right.
to you? How blah
Yeah.
blah blah." And I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what am I? He literally does look like me. He has glasses and curly hair. I mean, I'm not offended. I have no. So it's just things like that where you can just laugh and be like, the internet is just, people say weird, funny things, you know? So I think that that's humor just has a lot of benefits in this business.
So I thought maybe that this was part of the strategy to grow your account, but then I thought, no, probably you are funny and you're doing the funny reels. And so it is true also for, this couple at Domogrody, the shop that they own, it's called like this, and they are just funny. So it's totally natural for them that whatever they say on their stories is just, like funny. But they
Yeah.
were afraid that maybe it's not so good in the antiques world. And yeah, and I think it's good that it's changing, because why to make it only so, prestigious and so formal in a way.
Yeah. And I think also we have to be careful, especially on Instagram. There are some things, and I don't know that that's what they were thinking, but our customers love it. And and the thing is, sometimes there are things that I am tempted to do because it makes me look really good to other dealers, but my customers
Mhm.
really don't care. So I am there
Mhm.
for my customers. I am not there to impress other dealers or make other dealers think that I'm hot stuff, right? And so I think the humor is a great way to connect with our customers.
Also, I noticed, speaking of Instagram, your organizational skills are excellent. This is my impression, because you always post this a calendar on Instagram saying when your website restock is, when you go live with
Yeah.
sales, when talk shop is, and such. So I wonder, what are the advantages of
Well, I think for me, because of the stage of life I'm in with small children and very limited time to work on my business. So, I have my two older children are in school full time. My 2-year old, there are 2 mornings a week that she is in like a preschool program. And so and then she does nap in the afternoons. So my time is just so limited that I really have to be intentional. There's some people that list something every day. For me, it works better when I'm doing a website drop to do all my photos in one day, like just batch work, and then plan out that way. It also helps with my sourcing, like knowing I have a live sale coming up. These are the things that I want to have in stock so I can find those that week. And managing also, like when my kids, like when we had spring break and they were out of school for a whole week last month, I'm able to look ahead and be like, okay, not going to work very much that week. Let's keep it light. And that's a benefit of this business, is being able to reflect it in order to reflect what my family needs. And because I think I do have a complicated business model as far as I have their antique booth. I list on my website. I cross post to Etsy. I um, have the Instagram live sales. So I have a lot of different venues that I sell through.
You
So
also sell the starter kit for the other vintage sellers?
yeah, and that's
You have
free.
like an online, it is free. I
Yeah,
thought it was a
yeah.
product.
No, no, no. So
I
everyone,
missed that.
okay. Yeah. So it's free. It's a starter kit. Everyone can go to my Instagram profile. It's pinned at the very top of my reels. I mean, it just costs you your email address. Then you can join my email list and see how I do email marketing. Yeah. So, and it has all the tools and platforms that I use. Again, it's, obviously if you're living in Poland, it's, but hopefully it would at least give you some ideas of what's
Yeah,
available. So,
totally. I
especially
think
for the
so.
online products, I mean, it's great. So I do think that that is huge, just to figure out all the pieces of how to keep everything going. The reason I have so many different venues is that this is my full-time job. I don't, my husband is like the primary breadwinner. He's an engineer, and so I'm very thankful that he has a very stable income. But this
I'm married to
hasn't.
an engineer as well.
Oh my gosh, it's the best. Listen, everyone, tell your children they need to marry engineers because
Spread the world, the word to the spread the word
or
to
they
the
can
world.
become engineers, but I'm not great at math. So there's no way I would ever be an engineer. My math skills are, there's so many times I'll be bargaining with someone and I'll just be staring at them and they're looking at me and I'm like, I'm not trying to be rude. I'm just trying to do math in my head and it's really hard. So just give me a minute. But yeah, but this is my job. So I really feel like if you want your antique business to be a full-time business or even just to have a steady, stable income, it's very important to have multiple revenue streams.
Exactly. Yeah. I think with
Yeah.
any small businesses, multiple
Yes.
revenues is
Yeah.
important thing to follow, but yeah, especially here.
So organizing all that, I'm on Shopify. That is the engine that keeps everything going because I have my website there. I do invoicing for my Instagram live sales. I even track my booth sales, and Etsy sales get pulled over into Shopify. So I think finding the right platform to kind of
Yeah.
centralize everything is huge, to have all those numbers in one place. And I'm also a big fan of automation as much as possible. Like get other people or other platform systems in place where you're able to be as hands off as possible, which is one reason I was doing the Instagram feed sales, where you post a photo on your Instagram feed, you say how much it is, and then people comment sold, and then you have to email them for their email address, and then they have to shipping all that. And I'm like, no, I don't. When doing it that way, you can only reach a certain volume of orders at so high, and so switching that over to Etsy or Shopify, you're instantly going to just speed up the process by having them collect all that information for you. So
I really wanted to talk to you about those shop talks. It's a way to network with other sellers and maybe build those human connections that are so important. And then you can, I don't know, maybe even buy in bulk or exchange things that you're not interested in selling. Is that how it works for you?
yeah, and not so much in networking is like for selling and buying, but I do think that and I host that with Nicole from Vintage Haven Shop, who's a very dear friend and a really excellent business owner. So that has been a wonderful partnership between us. But we were getting so many questions from new sellers, and it was kind of the same questions. How do I start shipping? How do I start selling? How do I do Instagram?
But it's so interesting that they felt so free to ask you those questions. Maybe it's also a
Yeah.
cultural thing. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, well, and I've heard a lot of other people say that the information is very hard to find. And there are a lot of sellers that don't have the time or capacity or desire to share that
Yeah,
information.
exactly. I was thinking about this desire of sharing
Yeah.
the, yeah.
And which I understand because it does take a lot of time. But Nicole and I both have a huge passion for education. And that's always been a part of even when I was a nurse, education, I worked with teenagers, education was a huge part of my job. And I get really excited about empowering other business owners to be successful. That's been the interesting thing, going back to the surge in sellers on Instagram. This is, I am one of them. Post COVID, I am one of the results of that, is that Instagram and social media gave sellers easy access to platform and audience that 20 years ago you could only get by working for an established antique dealer for years and building, slowly networking and building that network and your business over time. Instagram really short-circuited that whole process. But one of the things that has been lost in that is that the mentorship process and connecting with in person, because this is something I tell people all the time. Meet people in your city. There are people who are like, how do you find a picker? How do you meet other dealers? Like, you can't just live your business on Instagram. You have got to get out, talk to people, build relationships, give out your phone number.
So how do you find the picker?
I mean, yeah, the only thing I gatekeep is my resources. But all I can say is network, network, network. Talk to people, establish relationships. If you do a Facebook Marketplace pickup, don't just pick and run. Talk to people, be personable, meet dealers in antique malls or at markets. If you go to a market, and a dealer has a whole bunch of stuff you love, give them your business card. Hey, give me a call. You can do this online as well through Instagram or Etsy. Hey, I see you have a bunch of stuff that I really love. What else do you have in stock? And so that whole process has really short-circuited, and I have seen heard of this happening because honestly, I don't spend a lot of time on other people's Instagram accounts because, again, I just don't have a ton of time. But, of antique dealers presenting something as antique that's really not antique, not as old as they think it is, or they take something at face value of what was told to them, and they don't even know how to research a piece, how to determine the age of something. They just Google lens it and run, and just say, okay, this is what it is. And again, I think that is because of people just getting on Instagram and selling instead of really working in person with other dealers over a long period of time, which has been the norm throughout all of the antique business lifespan. So now I'm still a very, very new dealer for sure. I've only been doing this for like 3 years, but I do feel certain skills that I have are research and networking. And because of that, and I'm so thankful that in Kansas City, there are a lot of dealers who've been working for 30 years who are very friendly, very approachable. They've told me, please just let me know if you have questions, right? There's people on Instagram that I've been able to connect with. And so I feel really strongly that we need that knowledge shouldn't be gatekeeping, because when you gatekeep knowledge, it hurts everyone. It hurts customers. It hurts sellers. For example, the reel that I did recently on identifying factory art, like, how do you know? It ruffled some feathers because some people did not like realizing that they had been selling. There were some people in it, but then I've had other customers reach out to me and they're like, thank you, because I almost bought a piece that was told to me it was antique and I realized it was from China because of it. I'm like, that's what I just want everyone to know. There's nothing wrong if you love a piece of art.
They can then make an informed decision whether they want it or not. So
yes. So I do think that surge in sellers, what I've seen is that there was a big surge in 2020 through 2023. And I think it's come down now because people realize that this is a ton of work to run a business that's actually
it's
profitable.
Not for everyone.
No. So I have seen, people quit selling, which is fine. It just depends what your goals are. If your goal is just to have fun and sell a few things every week and sell enough stuff to pay for something small and it's a hobby for you, that's awesome. You just have to know your goals. And realize what your capacity is at different times in life.
If you were to name 3 main challenges, obstacles that you've have overcome,
Mm.
what would they be?
I think the first one is buying things at the right price. And this is something it's still a big learning process. You make your money in the buy. That's another Drew Pritchard-ism. But it doesn't matter how much you can sell something for. If you spend too much on it, you're never going to make, your margin is not going to be there. You have to be willing to walk away from something if it's not the right price. I just did this the other day. I had one of my dealers send me a picture of this fabulous English breadboard, and I'm like, oh, this would look so good on my Instagram feed. People would love this. This would look photographed so well. But I ran the numbers and I walked away and thought about it, and I came back and I'm like, the margin's just not there. I can't justify spending that much.
Yeah.
You know, and she was like, that's fine. We'll let you know next time we have more. I'm like, that's great. You know, just being really honest and being like, my margin's just my margin's just not there. It's just too tight. So I can't swing it. But again, you really have to think about how much money. And I'm definitely, even though my name is Thrifty Whitney, I'm a big spender. Actually not that thrifty. So yeah, that is like really, really important. I think another big challenge has been figuring out Instagram, and finding my joy in Instagram, like finding not my joy, the joy, finding how to make Instagram fun and engaging. I know that people, if you're serious about Instagram growth, then Reels is the best way to grow on Instagram, and just leaning into that and finding, like you said, the humor is a big part of me. Like I love making funny videos. I love making videos that make me laugh. If I make a reel and I watch it 5 times and I laugh every time, I'm like,
That
okay,
is a good one.
I think it's a good one. And I think this is the biggest thing. If you are going to own your own business, you cannot be afraid of failure. I know that sounds so cliche and it sounds so stupid. You will fail, you will mess up, you will spend too much, you will have a website drop where somebody buys nothing, and you have to learn to just turn that into a learning opportunity. Okay, what can we learn from this? What did I like? Turn it into an experiment. Make it a little more objective, and understand like your success as a business is not a reflection on your personal worth and value. And that's really, really, really hard, especially if you're running a business on Instagram, where social media is designed to feed into our ego and our self-image. You have to learn to separate yourself a little bit. And how to deal with unhappy customers, or when things break, or when things go wrong. How can you take a beat and not just respond really emotionally, and think about your long term? How can I help this? How can I maintain this relationship with a customer? How can I make sure that this is good for the long term health of my business? Think about these things instead of what's going to make me feel better in the instant. So it's hard. When you get into owning a business, you don't realize how much personal junk it's going to bring up. It brings up a lot of
Exactly. Yeah. Well said. It can be a trigger.
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, every day. So thank you for sharing these. I have 2 more questions. For vintage lovers visiting the US, I imagine that navigating this diverse landscape of vintage shopping could be, quite a challenge. So, any advice you would offer to international visitors, vintage shoppers?
I think it depends. This is always hard. So it really depends on where you're going geographically. I would say if you can if you're going to a big city, try to get out of the city and go to some antique stores in the country. You'll have better prices and more unique stuff. If you can go to an outdoor market at all, there's a lot of flea markets and outdoor markets, especially on the East Coast more, but we have them in the Midwest as well. I'm going to try to go there because it'll be really fun. Go to an estate sale, just whatever city you go to, just look up estate sales in your area. Because sometimes you go just to look at the houses. There'll be like a mansion. They list it as like a $2 million house, and you can go in people's closets and their bathrooms and their basements. And some of the houses are very historical and old. So just sometimes to go to look at the architecture is really, really fun too. And even to see, sometimes I'll go to high-end sales or auction previews because and I think this is really, really important if you're serious about your business, is trying to educate your eye as much as possible. Go to museums, go to historical exhibits, go to the really, really expensive sales that you're not going to buy anything, but you can see things that you're not going to see anywhere else, so that when you see out in the wild, you know what you're looking at, you know the quality. It's kind of how people learn how to identify counterfeit money. They don't do it by looking at counterfeit money. What they do is they look at the real thing over and over and over and over again. So that's really important, I think, for any dealer.
Thanks for sharing this tip. It was really, really good one. So, we are in this video cast that is called Zachwyty. In Polish, Zachwyty, it translates to delights. So I wonder, which of the vintage designs delights you the most?
Oh, man. Vintage designs. What doesn't? I mean,
well,
so,
you said quilts? Yeah.
Yes, like quilts. I would say, definitely quilts. I love quilts from the 1880s, and I know that's very specific, but I love the fabrics and patterns used in that time. And like I showed earlier, I'm really in love with English breadboards, with the carvings and stuff. I just think I love everyday objects that kind of have like a beautiful artist, like handiwork to them. And the use too, like you see the knife marks and everything made. And this is kind of random now that we're talking about beautiful and useful, but I love William Morris textiles. If you look at, very arts and crafts, I adore the arts and crafts period
Me
in
too.
like English design and stuff. If I could live in one specific movement, that would be it.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for our conversation. It was just, great to hear about your experiences, about your journey, how it all started.
Yeah.
It was just pure pleasure. So thank you.
Thank you. I'm so excited to just share this with my followers. And
there are plenty of ways to support my channel. You can buy me a virtual coffee. You can follow my Vintage Rentals Instagram account or check out my shop. For handcrafted ribbons, I make myself, and high quality table candles. And of course, subscribe.